With part 2 officially being announced, I figured I'd go ahead and spoil what will most likely happen in the upcoming part 2 of the Dune movie set to be released October 23rd, 2023. For those of you who just can't wait to know what happens. Now keep in mind, some of the things mentioned may not show up in the movie, but part 1 was a pretty faithful adaptation, so I think it's safe to say most of this will make its way to the big screen. I think the movie will most likely open up with an arena fight scene with Feyd-Rautha. This character was excluded from part 1 but is actually the Baron's favorite nephew, younger brother to Rabban played by Dave Bautista. This nephew would eventually succeed the Baron, who also secretly wants to take the throne for House Harkonnen. One of the first things addressed may be the death of Liet Kynes, who in the book is Chani's father. This death is something Paul and Chani bond over, with both having just lost their father. Now obviously in the movie, Liet Kynes has been gender swapped to a female, most likely to add more women to this first movie, so either she will be Chani's mother or they will just scrap that whole relation thing altogether. As you can imagine, this, among other things, lead to Chani becoming Paul's concubine, similar to how Paul's mother, the Lady Jessica, is concubine or was concubine to the late Duke Leto. Now there is a reason why they can't marry, which we will have to get into a little bit later. Alright, so part 1 ends right after the duel between Jamis and Paul, who then finds out that he now has a wife and kids courtesy of Jamis. Such is the Fremen way. Paul essentially inherits all that was Jamis. Now Paul declines mating with Hera, Jamis's old wife, and tasks her instead as a servant. She is offended by this, but eventually is requested by the Lady Jessica to watch after her infant daughter Alia. Because if you remember, the Lady Jessica was actually pregnant at the end of part 1. But we will get more into Alia later. So Paul and his mother quickly insert and rise the ranks among the Fremen, particularly Paul, eventually becoming their leader. He does this through the legend of the Lisan al-Gaib, which is a prophecy the Bene Gesserit, the witches, inserted into the Fremen religion countless generations ago. Really, this Lisan al-Gaib to the Fremen is an outworlder who will bring water to Arrakis, the Dune planet. To the Bene Gesserit though, this is the Kwisatz Haderach, which is just the name they gave their breeding program in which they strive to create what is essentially a male Reverend Mother, one with the proper genetics to survive the spice agony and have full prescient vision, one who can access both their male and female ancestral memories. So essentially Paul will be able to see all of the memories of his ancestors, and he will be able to see possible futures. Now in part 1 we already see Paul doing some of this, but his power has not been fully unlocked yet. Paul and his mother train the Fremen, who are already great warriors just from surviving in this unlivable desert. They train them in the weirding ways, which is what the Fremen call combat, like in part 1 when Stilgar calls Jessica a weirding woman. So the Fremen become an even more unstoppable combat force, which keeps getting referenced in this as desert power. Jessica also will replace the Fremen's current aging Reverend Mother by partaking in the Spice Agony, or drinking of the Water of Life. Basically, she must drink a highly concentrated and deadly dose of the spice, and if she survives, her mind will unlock to the memories of her female ancestry, and thus becoming a full Reverend Mother, or she'll die. She lives, and this now gives her even more standing among the Fremen alongside her son Paul, their Lisan al-Gaib. During the Spice Agony though, her unborn child Alia awakens in the womb, having also been exposed to this test. So 2 Reverend Mothers are actually made during the test. But this awakening causes Alia to be an abomination, for her ancestral memories were open to her before she could even have any experiences or memories of her own, before she could even be born. After she is born, she is seen as a demon by the Fremen because she looks like a very young girl, but acts and talks as one who has the experiences of countless generations before her. Hera, Jessica, and Paul are really the only ones who accept her. To solidify Paul as a full Fremen, he must mount and ride his first worm, which he succeeds at, and this, among his growing power, makes the younger Fremen males want him to challenge Stilgar to overthrow him and become their new leader. Such is the Fremen way. Paul is friends with Stilgar and does not wish to kill him, so he manages to persuade the Fremen to change their ways. Paul winds up meeting back up with Gurney Halleck during a raid, who then joins Paul. It'll be interesting how Gurney will be used in part 2, because in the book there's this huge plot thread where a lot of the central characters outside of Paul suspected Lady Jessica as the traitor, not Dr. Yueh. And so Gurney attempts to kill Lady Jessica, but I assume this will have to be altered for the movie, because in part 1 they kind of just blew over that whole suspicion on the traitor. Paul ends up having a boy with Chaney named Leto after his deceased father. Sadly, this infant boy is killed by Raban during an attack at a location where the Fremen women and children are residing. Despite being a bunch of women and children, the enemies are greatly outmatched and desperately escape with their prisoner, Alia. Alia is taken before Shaddam IV, Emperor of the known universe, and confesses that she actually allowed herself to be captured so she would not have to tell Paul of his son's death. Now, Shaddam IV was only mentioned in part 1, but he is of House Corino and is the current ruler, so he is actually above the main villain who we saw a lot of, the Baron Vladimir of House Harkonnen. Paul secretly drinks the water of life, goes into a coma, this being both alive and dead at the same time just builds up his legend among the Fremen. He is awakened by his love, Chaney. Now his prescient vision is fully unlocked. Paul and his Fremen army launch an attack on the Emperor, quickly and easily dispatching and cornering the Emperor. They kill Raban, avenging the death of his son Leto. Alia kills her grandfather, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, with the Gom Jabbar, the thing held at Paul's neck during the box scene in part 1. Yes, I did say grandfather. Unbeknownst to the Lady Jessica, the disgusting Vladimir Harkonnen was actually her father, making him Paul and Alia's grandfather. This is something that I believe originally was revealed during the tent scene from part 1 in the book. Paul, being exposed to more melange, makes the connection and reveals it to Jessica. It'll be interesting when this will be revealed during part 2 though. So Paul bargains with the cornered Emperor, offering him the marriage of his eldest daughter as he suggested to his mother in part 1. This would give him the right to the Golden Lion throne. But he must duel the Baron's favorite nephew first though, Feyd-Rautha, who invokes the right of vengeance for his deceased uncle and brother. This duel between Feyd and Paul is more significant than the movie might end up suggesting, because Feyd also is a pawn in the Bene Gesserit breeding program. Actually, if Jessica hadn't messed up their plans and fell in love with the Duke Leto, producing a son one generation early instead of daughters, Feyd would have ended up marrying one of those daughters, thus producing the Kwisatz Haderach that the Bene Gesserit actually wanted, the one that they could manipulate easily. Despite Feyd's attempted trickery with poison blades, Paul wins and forces the Emperor into the deal, becoming the new Emperor of the known universe in the process. Shaddam IV is then exiled. Paul marries the Emperor's eldest daughter, the Princess Irulan, but vows to Chaney to be faithful only to her, which he does keep good on despite Irulan's beauty. Paul refuses to ever be a puppet to the Bene Gesserit, and so ends Dune. There are 5 more books in Frank Herbert's saga, and there are rumors of them wanting to make this film franchise into a trilogy, so perhaps we will get an adaptation of Dune Messiah. So if you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more Dune content, and maybe I'll spoil the potential 3rd movie.